Hello, my name is Andrew Keane. Welcome to Keane on America, the daily interview show about the United States. Hello everybody, we're on the road today, down the road actually from my home in San Francisco, at the Internet Archive, the digital library for our online world, with its founder, Kahle, a legendary figure, part of the Internet Hall of Fame, and a man who spent a lot of time thinking about how we can remember our digital content. A lot of talk these days, in our age supposedly of surveillance capitalism, about how the internet can't forget, how it remembers everything, but Brewster's concerned with its forgetting. Is that fair, Brewster?
That's absolutely fair. That, yes, there's some things that shouldn't live, that live on, but there's an awful lot of people's writings and podcasts or memories and relationships that just drop away because of, well, corporations change direction or want to do something else.
Are you concerned though with surveillance, or is that just not the kind of thing that librarians worry about?
Surveillance is turning the internet into something people are very fearful of. They're feeling like the web has betrayed them, and that is that's terrible. If we lose trust in each other based on massive permitted bad behavior, that will make it so that we don't want to share. And we are, as a species, a sharing, happy, collaborative species. But you can put the kibosh on that. And we've seen that happen in different parts of the world, and we're seeing it happen now on those that are in the online world.
The Internet Archive has a fascinating new pamphlet out. It's called Vanishing Culture. And at the end, in your summary piece, you note that, and I'm quoting you here, our evolving digital age can either be our next Carnegie moment, of course referring to Andrew Carnegie and his libraries, or it can be a Library of Alexandria moment. In other words, the library's burned down. Explain what the Carnegie moment is and what the Alexandria moment is, and why we should fear the Alexandria moment.
The Andrew Carnegie had this spirit to go and invest in everyone, to go and learn, grow, and be their best selves. Not by going and putting out textbooks that were going to tell people one truth, but by building libraries to go and make it so that people can read, grow, and become as much as they can. So that during the early days of the 20th century, there was enormous investment in public libraries, public universities, public schools. And when, after World War II, when the United States was sort of thrust into the big leagues of taking the world stage, because, well, pretty much every place else was bombed flat, the United States was ready. And part of that was because of the public library system and the vision of Andrew Carnegie. Every town in America has a public library that's supported by the residents, and it's helped us grow into great people in the late 20th century.
It's funny that you call it a Carnegie moment. Of course, Andrew Carnegie is a controversial figure, spent half his life, it seems, ripping people off, or certainly making himself a very rich man, and then the other half giving the money back. Is that the model that the Bezoses, the Zuckerbergs, the Gates should be trying to emulate?
They now have immense wealth that they could be giving away if they figured out how to give it away well. Whether they should have that amazing levels of wealth in the first place, I would actually come and doubt. I think wealth inequality tends to destroy societies. But that's a different subject. Andrew Carnegie, yes, is a controversial figure, but the Carnegie libraries were an investment in self-actualization, public education that has paid dividends that we're still not able to live down. But we're right now in the process of smashing on the public library system, the public education system, the public university system in the United States in ways that's quite devastating.
You, in many ways, Bruce, have dedicated your life to librarianship, digital librarianship.
Yeah.
As I said, many people call you the internet's librarian. Why?
I'm a geek. I mean, I grew up, just having a skill of being able to go and build computer systems. And the question is what do you want to do with that skill? And so that was the puzzle that was set to me in college by a good friend. And so I could only come up with a couple answers. One was to try to protect people's privacy when they would just, in general, throw it away. The other was to build the Library of Alexandria version 2. You could go and make all the published works of humankind available to people. I tried to do the privacy one, but I couldn't make that cost little enough to help end users. It would mostly help large corporations, the mafia, and the intelligence groups, and they had their own people to help them. So I went and worked on this library thing for the last 45 years. We needed some things to work. We needed an open internet, so we had to transition the ARPANET to the internet. Did that. I didn't do that, but we did that. We needed computers that could go and store a lot and make it searchable. I did help a lot in that, building supercomputers, thinking machines back in the old days. We needed free and open source software because the copyright laws had become so draconian that we needed a way of getting around what the publishers had done to the copyright system. And so that was free and open source software. And then we needed publishers on board making money to make this thing work. And so I helped along those lines. And then by the early 1990s, we're kind of ready, right? We were having people pour their lives into this new internet and these new websites and going and sharing at this velocity. Then it was time to build the library. And so in 1996, we started the Internet Archive and started by collecting the web, but now also television, radio, books, periodicals, and made them as available as possible. And so it's that dream of the library of everything that I've dedicated my career to, but many, many others have as well.
Do you feel you've accomplished it?
No.
Why?
The thing I didn't... in many ways, the library system we have now is worse than the library system that I had growing up. It's faster to use the information that's available in Google, right? It's on your desktop, it's instantaneous. You have these phones that are connected, so you have access to something really, really, really fast. But if you know anything really well, it's not online. Or at least a lot of it's not online. There's maybe a Wikipedia page about it, whatever, but the depth is not there. So we've now brought up a generation when we could have brought up a generation with the library system at their fingertips, the Library of Congress at their fingertips. We don't have it. We don't have it. What we do have is people wanting to share and wanting to learn. We just turned 1 trillion web pages in the Internet Archive. Maybe 1 billion people's voices are now in the library. People are awesome. People want to share. But whenever things touch the publishing system, it tends to just come cratering down and controlled. So we have basically 1 trillion web pages. We have kind of everything except the Library of Congress, except the library system. It's just not there, and it's becoming more and more walled off. There are now 60% of news organizations put paywalls up. So basically the high-end newspapers are becoming newsletters for the rich. And that's not very good. we're starting to have a generation now that don't know what's true or not true about the 20th century because they haven't had access to the printed works, the published works about the 20th century. People are really confused of whether the Holocaust happened. And that may sound like a sarcastic, like, how could you possibly not know? Look online. And it's not like the library is there for people. There's all sorts of other things. I like the line from the Current Affairs editor. It said, the truth is paywalled and the lies are free.
But Wikipedia isn't free. Is not paywalled, Bruce. If someone wants to check out whether or not the Holocaust happened, can't they just go to Wikipedia?
Yes, Wikipedia is fantastic, but it's kind of shallow. But let me ask you a question. It's like, why did we have to do Wikipedia? It's not like we didn't have encyclopedias before, but why did we have to go and write it all again? And the reason why we had to is because the existing writings were under a copyright regime controlled by people that didn't want to share it openly, even though they could have made real business money out of all of that. They didn't. And so we had to go and write Wikipedia again with a new license to get around the copyright problems that were put in place in the United States in 1976. So we had 50 years of the copyright regime that went from opt-in copyright. You used to have to put a little C on things and send a copy into the Library of Congress, to opt-out. Everything's under copyright and basically forever, and they keep lengthening how long it'll go for. So Wikipedia is tremendous. People are awesome. If you take other things like archive with an X, archive, which is preprint servers, that was also a way around before your academic paper went into the publishers such that people won't be able to see it anymore. People would go and contribute it to this website, archive, and it's revolutionized how people do academic work because the knowledge is accessible. If there's plenty of money to keep these publishers around, there's actually plenty of money to pay authors, but it's not going to authors. It tends to stop with a few very, very large media conglomerates. I was just at a symposium about the 76 Copyright Act in the Berkeley Law Clinic and a law school that they put on, and it had the registrar of copyrights, the appellate court, and they said sort of what happened out of this. And the thing that they were surprised about was the conglomeration.
So you're talking what about Penguin Random House?
Yes, where there's on the order of 4 or 5 book publishers, not just in the United States, and worldwide. I mean, we're not talking about just one state. This is the West. If you have academic publishing, it's down to about 3, and that really dominates. If you take the record music industry, it's down to a few, and it's worldwide. That was never allowed in the 20th century America I grew up in. This antitrust would not have allowed that at all. And some of the repercussions of having that concentrated level of power of distribution of knowledge, but it's also the creation, what gets funded, and why people have basically had moved to the coasts of the United States. Why did that happen? Is these sort of large-scale conglomerates push the money into more and more concentrated places to find the greatest hits, the best ofs, instead of a long tail of local publishing, local ideas.
Although, Bruce, I have to say, I've got who will remain nameless, I have a friend who runs one of the largest independent publishing companies, and he's not very keen on your archive. I'm not sure how much he knows about it, but I told him I was coming in to talk to you, and he feels, and others in publishing feel, that you give away their stuff for free. How would you respond to that argument?
Libraries have always bought materials from publishers, often local, and such that it supports local creative environments. It's about 20% of the revenue of if you just take book publishing, it's about 20% of the trade publishers. is from library funding. That's socialized injection of money into the creative industries, particularly in the United States, but it's also worldwide. So what libraries do is we buy things, we preserve them, we lend them in controlled ways, and we work with other libraries, like interlibrary loan. But that, in the digital era, has completely changed. So in the digital era, libraries are not allowed to buy things. They're allowed to rent access in a surveillance environment of database products that are still served by fewer and fewer corporations. They're not allowed to preserve the materials. They don't actually even get the bits in most cases. They're just customer service departments. Then there's lending. Well, in the United States, lending of digitized books was ruled illegal. In Holland and then in the rest of Europe, they ruled it legal. They actually want to have libraries to move forward, buying and supporting and lending. And then interlibrary loan, that's also in the United States highly, highly restricted. So I think we had a system that worked for centuries, and the movement against libraries funding and owning and supporting the populace and publishers and authors, that bargain is off.
So we know that, at least your view on the problems of big media, and that's an argument that was particularly common, I think, at the turn of the 21st century in the Web 2.0 age. But Bruce, you don't need me to tell you, the zeitgeist has shifted. People don't vilify big media as much. These days, the problem in many people's mind is big tech. How do these new tech conglomerates, from Google and Microsoft to Facebook and Amazon, how do they play into your narrative in this crisis of libraries?
I think the model is this sort of large-scale conglomeration, control of distribution, and it's I think they're kind of the same issue. You won't tend to, the Murdoch structures, around the lots of different media types, the Sinclairs, the acquisition of more and more of the American media by politically oriented acquisitions. I think we're seeing in both the publishing online, whether it's the Twitter, X kinds of moves, Facebook and the like, and also other kinds of publishing, all the way up and down. What we saw in the cable era was those that control the distribution tend to go and buy up the upstream sources. So that's why Comcast, owns a bunch of movie studios. And now we have Amazon going and buying MGM. So that's kind of natural. So they're not that distinct. I think if you read one publishing approach, they tend to point to another as a problem. But I think the consolidation of points of view into very few controlled production and distribution of knowledge is not what you end up with. It's not what you need for a prospering democracy, capitalist structure with large numbers of small competitors, no barriers to entry to go and make better products. That's not what you see in a monopolistic, oligarchic environment.
Some people might say, well, I can go onto YouTube, and if I'm willing to look at the ads, I can see any video pretty much ever made, it seems these days. Google offers their search engine for free. Anyone can use it as long as you're able to access it one way or the other. I'm willing again to put up with adverts, which you don't always have to click on. What about that Web 2.0 advertising model, Brewster? Does that undermine content? Libraries?
I don't think you could see anything published on YouTube if you're willing to put up ads. I mean, it's not really there. I mean, there's a lot there, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of material that is available. But if you're looking for something in particular, or if you're looking to go and do deep research on something, it's just not there. YouTube is not a library. It's a large collection of materials that have been put up. But to answer your questions on the ad model and the sort of what is creatively called the surveillance capitalism. So one of the problems with that kind of ad-based model, and we knew this early on of trying to get the internet to go, is you end up with very few winners. You end up with people that control the ad networks themselves, and they tend to then be able to buy up all of the other magazines or all the other newspapers as long as they're allowed by the governments. And more, they're allowed to buy those things up, and because you're controlling ad distribution. So that tends to be a game with very few winners. Another approach is how we did publishing for the first, from say 1600 until the late 1900s. And that is a royalty model. So you actually pay, and some of the money goes back upstream to things like authors. Often not as much money as you'd like, but there's a mechanism of taking money and making it go back upstream without any central points of control. As Lessig always points out, once you have a central point of control some way, they'll work up and backwards to go and make sure that the whole chain becomes controlled. So the way to have democracy, successful capitalist system, is to make it so that you can have lots of competition at every point in the system. That's the way to make an information ecosystem function.
Brewster, what's happened meanwhile while we have this chaos of the online revolution? What's happened to the physical Carnegie Library in America?
They're still supported by their local taxpayers. They're still believed in. People love them. I mean, out of civic institutions, I think that's kind of one of the ones that have avoided, issues that people have with the police or even the legislature, or people love their libraries. But what we're seeing is, book bannings. We're seeing criminalization of librarianship, seeing defundings. But the structural problems to libraries is this licensing model, where copyright wasn't enough. Now there's licenses such that libraries don't even own anything anymore, so that they basically can have that. A book can be disappeared from all shelves all at once if it's in electronic form. And that happens, or books are changed. And so we've all read, growing up, what happens when you have that kind of levels of control. And it's starting to happen as we've shifted from the physical to when people are wanting mostly digital. The physical world is still surviving. Books are being bought. They're being bought, though, from fewer and fewer publishers that don't represent necessarily the points of view of all the people that are in their environment. But at least the underlying laws around first sale and purchasing haven't been undermined in the physical world.
And meanwhile, we're putting ourselves online. Since you've started the Internet Archive, more and more people define themselves according to social media, their Facebook, X, all forms of social media. Is this vanishing too? Is this part of the crisis, Brewster? The way in which the owners of the social media platforms are somehow empowered to vanish culture, vanish our content, our photographs, our videos, our commentaries?
Well, I got to give a fun talk at the Facebook Museum in the Netherlands, which was opening of a Facebook museum and it was sort of tongue-in-cheek of what happens if we look at Facebook in the rearview mirror. And so I always gave a talk to go and just okay, what were the other forms of this during the digital era, back going backwards to the FidoNets and the bulletin board systems, GreenNet, PeaceNet, the Well, through AOL and GeoCities, MySpace, Live Journal, on and on and on. We have these systems where people have invested themselves and putting their ideas out there and putting themselves in the hands of these companies that then get bought or change their position, and it all goes away over and over and over again. So we've invested ourselves, we've come to the party, but it feels like we're being betrayed. The works are not being cared for in the ways that they deserve. So I think we need a different approach. We need to actually make systems that work in a decentralized way, where there's more distributed control, but also that it's not clunky and really kind of, janky, right? So it's easier to make centralized systems than it is to make decentralized systems.
Are some of the centralized systems better than others? One that comes to mind is Apple. Many of us use an iPhone. I use one. Apple stores all our videos, our emails. I trust it. I certainly would trust it more than some of the other big tech companies. Are Apple doing something a bit better, or are they part of the problem too?
I use Apple products. They work extremely well. What I really like about them, at least like the Macintosh that I use, is I can write software or play other people's software without having it be gatekeeped. The iPhone, on the other hand, they put real restrictions on what apps you're allowed to run on the machine. And that kind of level of control is unnerving. Even though it does look like an open ecosystem, there are a lot of things that aren't allowed onto the iPhone. That hasn't gone through to its full abuse levels. But Apple comes out with hardware that's really tremendous, and the level of engineering and effort that goes into that, the design of those machines, is really quite good. So that's all good news. Now let's use it for different and interesting things. One thing is they put a lot of GPUs out in the field. We could run local models, local AI things for doing most of what it is we want out of AI. And that wouldn't share your data back upstream at all. We can buy, for $1,000, you can buy a computer with a terabyte of disk space on it. A terabyte's a lot. If you take all of the words in the Library of Congress, it's only 28 terabytes. So that's all the words in the Library of Congress. So if you buy a laptop for it that has a terabyte, we're dealing with sizable repositories, even if you're doing with a lot of video. So I like the idea of having people empowered with devices they can control, that they can run the software that they want to on it, that serves them rather than serve some other master. So in that case, all for it.
Bruce, I want to come to AI in a second. It's always the final question in these kind of interviews because it's on everyone's mind these days. But you're a figure who has been very optimistic about technology. As I said, you're one of the early members of the Internet Hall of Fame. Tim Berners-Lee and many of the other fathers of the digital revolution. You are indeed yourself a father. What do you make of this shift in the zeitgeist? Fewer and fewer people trust technology. There's more and more opposition to the so-called tech bros. You've never been a tech bro, but you, when you were earlier, were a startup entrepreneur too. Are you concerned with that, or does that reflect the fact that the public is finally waking up to its digital fate?
The AI tools are fantastically powerful, fantastically useful, but they're controlled by way too few people. One of the things we tried to do in the early internet was to make it so that lots of people could go and make services on this new internet, World Wide Web, that you just had to play the protocols and you are in. That's not the way things are going now. It looks like in the United States, because it's just massive lawsuits. The appellate judge that spoke the other day said there are over 100 major lawsuits, most of them class action lawsuits, against these big tech companies. And you know how that ends up, right? This is when there's backroom deals that end up between publishing conglomerates and the tech companies, such that you can go and have it, make it so that there aren't going to be new entrants. They're the only ones that can go and withstand $100 million
How do these,
attacks.
sorry to jump in here,
Yeah.
Bruce, but how do these backroom deals get done?
There's settlements.
Well, they're settlements.
There's settlements. So if you take the Google Book settlement, that was an attempt between Google and the Authors Guild in the United States, that was seen as an antitrust violation, a treaty violation, every which way problem. So that settlement didn't pass muster as a class action rejiggering of the whole copyright scheme, and then it had to go back to court, and the judge determined what Google was doing was fair use. Ta-da! It was over. So they didn't end up with this bargain that was negotiated between those two. We're now seeing that kind of bargain trying to be struck again between the same basic players, big tech and the big publishing conglomerates and the collecting rights organizations and those folks that are trying to make a deal. And who's not at that table? Well, the public, entrepreneurs, libraries. I mean, so you're going to end up with settlements that are negotiated between these players that are exclusionary of anybody that's not at that table.
I take your point, but I'm not sure you answered my question. Are you disappointed with the way in which technology generally now is mistrusted by the public? Big tech, small tech, doesn't matter what the tech is.
Oh, I'm part of the group that distrusts what's going on. I think it's gone fantastically wrong. I think we've taken things that could be benefiting a very large number of people and making people feel like they're just cannon fodder, or they're the product. They're being surveilled. It's a gateway of these control mechanisms that make it possible for you to do authoritarian and totalitarian structures easily. And Snowden called it turnkey tyranny, that we're just, all it needs is somebody that's motivated to go and think tyrannically or authoritarianism, and all of the laws, the policies, the technologies are all there. And so is that a condemnation of the technology and the technologists? Yes, but I'd say it's really upon us because we allowed way too much centralization of control. And so that theme for me is sort of where the real problem is. The technology is moving along. It's how are we going to apply it? Out of AI, what I want is public AI. We want AI that serves the public good. Let's take this new tool that's fantastically powerful and have it read all of these things that we've been digitizing. We just got all of the agricultural records basically from the British Empire for the last century and digitize them. So you're not going to read, people weren't reading the Sri Lankan 1953 fish reports, but your computer can, and be able to see patterns in it, to be able to go and answer the big climate issues that are going on. So Climate GPT, which is an initiative in Europe, supported by the Internet Archive Europe, because it's allowed in Europe to do public AI, is some way we can go and make some real progress. What's going on in the United States is we may only see 1, 2, or 3 gigantic
and
players.
those, speaking of gigantic players, we're in San Francisco. Up the road are 2 of those, OpenAI and Anthropic. Have you reached out to a guy like, for example, Dario Amodei, who seems to want to do good? Have you talked to Sam Altman? He only lives up the road.
I haven't met some of those players, but the Internet Archive has been working back and forth with those organizations to figure out how can we be helpful within the laws and structures and what is right within the library system. So one thing that the Internet Archive has done is to go and take open collections, like the old books that are fallen out of copyright, or all of the government information, and try to make that available not just to the big guys, but to lots and lots of small guys, so that they can go and use their clusters to go and do things like Climate GPT. Another thing that was demonstrated just last week at WikiCred, the idea, there was a conference held here at the Internet Archive to help build the credible references from Wikipedia by going and making a toolbox, AI powered, to go and say, here's the assertions in a Wikipedia article. Is it supported or not supported based on the literature? And the AI, by going and reading all of this open journal publishing literature, can go and give fantastic support or go and say it's not supported and help build Wikipedia to be better. Those are types of uses, Climate GPT or a Wikipedia toolbox, are some of the great reasons why we need these AI tech in non-commercial hands, so that we're solving some of the big problems of our day, of disinformation, of climate, of healthcare, that is for the public good.
Two very quick questions. Finally, Brewster, I know you've got to run. You've been very generous with your time. We appreciate it. There are people, of course, who argue that all this AI, whether it's Anthropic or Gemini or ChatGPT, all the wisdom, all the knowledge has been stolen. Where did they get the content to create their intelligence? Where do you stand on that?
A lot of the AI that we're using to try to do optical character recognition. Conversation earlier today was trying to go and read microfiche and find the pages on it. And so the AI tools that we're using are, I guess, much more mundane. In terms of what's the balance between large media conglomerates, call them AI companies, and large media conglomerates called publishers, how they should organize themselves, I guess we're going to see how that works out.
And very simple, a yes or no answer. Is the current AI landscape with these big AI companies now worth hundreds of billions of dollars, is it mass larceny or not? Yes or no?
Mass larceny or not? I'd say the real loser out of a lot of this is going to be people.
So it's yes, it is mass larceny.
But I think usually the answer for there is whether that mass media conglomerate, which is called an AI company, is stealing from another mass media conglomerate. I wouldn't say that's actually the dynamic that I see playing out. I see it's these large corporations taking from people's goodwill, their creative thoughts, their output, their authorship, and it's landing in very few hands. So I think it's not a big, should it be the publishers or the AI companies? Is sort of like saying Coke versus Pepsi. I mean, maybe the answer isn't either of those. I think we need a different alignment towards the public and public good and public AI and public tech to be able to have a way through a dissolving of our institutions, our concept of what's true, who can we trust, that is being undermined at a phenomenal level.
Final question, Brewster. You have this wonderful new pamphlet, Vanishing Culture. Many very interesting contributors. You have the final note on it. To end our conversation, I think many people will be deeply concerned with your observations about vanishing culture, the amnesia online in the digital world where everything gets forgotten. Could you end with a couple of very concrete ways that we can fight vanishing culture?
So this book that the Internet Archive is putting out is a collection of essays of different users, but also people that are interested in different media types over time that are sort of getting washed away as we go through a digital transition and a transition of power. And You're asking, actually, I forgot what you're asking. Are you looking for concrete examples of?
No,
of
concrete ways in which we can fight this vanishing culture, where the internet will remember, but it won't be surveillance capitalism.
I think of the real source of where the information came from, and the passion for going and making sure that it's passed down is through individuals and small groups of people. It's the one-person museums. It's the small-scale libraries. It's the flourishing of creation, protection, but then making sure that it moves down a generation. And places like Wikipedia, the Internet Archive, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, even the open source software movement are all mechanisms to try to take succession seriously, to go make it so that we don't end up with investing in a commercial property that then gets disbanded. How do we go and make things move on? So, how to make this win? Take something seriously that you want to make sure makes it to the next generation and put some effort into it. People have expertise in railroad schedules, or the occult, or their family histories, and go and make copies and go and hold on to them and move them forward from generation to generation. Make sure that people know and like and get exposed to the materials, because having dark archives doesn't work very well. Backups, if they're not used, they don't work when you actually need them. So keep things alive and available and moving down. Make copies of things that you want to make sure your kids can learn from.
Can we make a copy of Brewster Kahle, Brewster?
I'd rather not. One of the great things about humans is, at least at this point, we still die.
Well, we need you, Brewster Kahle. Wonderful conversation. A living legend, a member of the Internet Hall of Fame. Real honor to talk. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Andrew again. Thank you so much for listening or watching the show. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. We're on Substack, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, all the platforms. And I'd be very curious as to your comments as well on what you think of the show, how it can be improved, and the kinds of guests that you would enjoy hearing or listening to in future. Thank you again.